Roaring Kitty is back, Pharma Bro is back, and there's no shortage of Schadenfreude coming up on Block and Order. Welcome to Block and Order, the show that explores the legal issues facing the world of Web3 and beyond. I'm Kyle Lawrence, and with me, as always, without his glasses on, he looks kind of like Superman, Moish.
What's like the worst superhero? I feel like that's what
The worst superhero?
Yeah.
Well, I know for sure who the worst X-Man is. I have the unequivocal correct answer about this.
Okay.
It's the guy who, in the first movie, he turns into a puddle of water and then immediately dies. It's a pretty shitty superpower to be imbued with.
I feel like you have to go like Gambit or something if you're going to say it's the worst X-Men. You got to like be a little aggressive and get people angry.
Yeah, the playing cards is kind of a dumb.
It's like, I like the idea, but in reality, he's like, what if you're not that good at throwing? Oh, whatever. Okay, fine.
I guess you'd use something else like a shuriken or something. I mean, that would just make you a ninja, I guess, not a Gambit superhero. I don't know.
Yeah, so maybe I look more like Wolverine with the glasses off.
Wolverine's pretty awesome.
It's pretty awesome, X-Men.
We could talk about superheroes all day, but the show must go on, folks.
Going to the top of the order today, we are talking about PleasrDAO filing a lawsuit against Martin Shkreli. Famous Pharma Bro is now being sued for copying and sharing, allegedly, the one-of-a-kind Wu-Tang Clan album, Once Upon a Time in Shaolin. Now, if you remember, Shkreli originally bought the album directly from the Wu-Tang back in 2015 for $2 million, but then got caught up in some criminal mischief, and let's say the government seized it from him. And the government then auctioned it off, and guess who won that auction? Our favorite collector DAO, PleasrDAO, who purchased it for over $4 million. They actually did. There was a two-step auction. Two-step purchase. They won the auction, and then they separately went to Wu-Tang and secured the rights to the copyright in the album itself, spending a total of, I believe, $4.7 million, as alleged in the complaint.
I did not.
So what are they angry about? They're angry that Shkreli is running around on social media saying, "Well, actually, I still have a copy of the album, even though nobody's supposed to have a copy, and I promised and signed an agreement saying I wouldn't have a copy." And has also been playing it and maybe even sharing copies with other people all around the world. So the lawsuit is seeking injunctive relief to basically prevent Shkreli from having any copies, for seizure of all the copies, for a list of individuals who Shkreli gave copies to, and for money damages. So Kyle, what do you think? Is Martin Shkreli actually in the right here?
Well, look, I shudder to ever take this man's side. Quite frankly, I find him to have the most punchable face in the entire United States, and I'm not ashamed to say it. I don't know if he's just a professional troll, like if he's doing these things on purpose. Honestly, I don't know, because it's not like he's a stupid guy. He understands what he's doing, and I don't know. I don't really know where I land on this, because I have such personal animosity towards him for what he did a couple years ago by raising the price of Daraprim from $1,750 to $750, which is just the most obnoxious thing you could do. I don't know if that's clouding my judgment. I just hate him. And what's funny about this album...
Wow. Tell us how you really feel, Kyle.
This album was actually created in protest of devaluing music in the streaming era. And so, like, to have these things happen is just, I don't know, it's comical. I think it's just funny that all these things are happening. You feel differently.
It's funny because I think he's actually become something. I mean, this is clearly him being an antagonist, right? This is him playing the villain role, I guess for fun. Maybe he's a troll. I don't know. But before this, I think he had actually become something of a Robinhood-like figure on Twitter. And he seems to be calling out other skeezy people. Maybe it takes one to know one. I don't know, right? But he kind of had built some legitimacy on Twitter, in my opinion, at least. Now, I think you're right on the music part of this, and the way the Wu-Tang Clan originally released this as kind of like a subversion of commerce, and now a DAO that's actually a Cayman Foundation is really the owner of it, and is now like Shkreli's trying to share the copies everywhere. And it's like this anti-file sharing is actually the DAO. It's kind of a reverse uh, inversion of all the expectations of why this album was created
It's
and how
true.
you would expect it to be shared.
Yeah. Be curious to see how this shakes out. I mean, it's one thing when you mess with the American consumer, but you don't mess with Wu-Tang. That's just a bridge too
Well said.
far.
Well said.
Sorry to say,
Well
but
said.
no, you're right. You're not clouded by your personal beliefs by this, so I cede the floor to you.
All right, moving on to our next topic. Robinhood has agreed to acquire the global cryptocurrency exchange Bitstamp for approximately $200 million, aiming to close the deal in the first half of 2025. This move being part of Robinhood's planned expansion into the digital asset sector and also global expansion, given that Bitstamp holds about 50 licenses and registrations across both US, European, and Asian markets. So Kyle, Robinhood was quite famously the I don't know, like the meme stock place.
They were.
Can Robinhood be the meme stock for crypto place come 2025 when now all of a sudden they own a legitimate global cryptocurrency exchange?
They do. This is really interesting because currently Robinhood offered 15 crypto tokens to U.S. retail investors and 30 in Europe. And Bitstamp, by contrast, lists something like 85, between 80 and 85. This definitely increases their footprint. It's also interesting that this news comes about a month or so after they received a Wells notice from the SEC. They haven't been formally sued yet, but they did get that Wells notice, and they, of course, firmly believe that they'll work with the SEC and get all this, sorted out. But I do find this news just very interesting. I tip my cap to Robinhood. I wonder how it's going to change the way they're viewed, and we'll get to the other news around them in a second. But Robinhood, steal from the rich and give to the poor. Well, they're about to become the rich, if they aren't already. So I'm curious to see where their ethos goes. If they're still going to attract the same type of retail investor. They really, they've been around a while, but they exploded during the pandemic where people were home and they were receiving $1,200 checks and they didn't know what to do with it and they had nothing else to do. So let's do meme stocks. Let's do a Wall Street, everybody.
Right,
And really
right,
curious to see how
right.
following this acquisition, what's going to happen.
Well, I think it's a natural expansion here. I think you're right that Robinhood is this very consumer focused app and letting kind of mom and pop people like
Mm,
play options in a really kind of fantastical game like way. Why not throw a crypto exchange in there?
right.
And I think if you can short circuit, I think it takes a lot of time and energy and effort to get global licenses and to build up that footprint.
Sure.
And if you're looking at that daunting task, I think you can say, well, maybe we should just go out to the market and buy someone. It kind of makes sense.
Sure.
Now, I think you're right that they've already had a lot of regulatory scrutiny. This is probably only going to increase that temperature to the extent the SEC follows through on the Wells notice, the lawsuit.
Yeah.
And who knows, right? But so like, right, there could be more regulatory scrutiny. But if a fintech like Robinhood is moving in this direction and sees this as a strategic expansion, you have to wonder if there aren't other competitors that are thinking the same thing.
Right.
And if there's not some kind of larger macro thesis around that, hey, cryptocurrency is not going away. It's still these are consumer apps. Coinbase and other US exchanges are continuing to grow. Let's continue to grow that footprint and link, TradFi with Web3.
Right. And also very quickly in the news about Robinhood, Roaring Kitty made a triumphant return after 3 years of being off in the wind, being a multi billionaire.
I know we're over time, but how do you see that ending? I mean, he's got hundreds of millions. Maybe we'll know by the time this episode is released, but
Right.
he's got hundreds of millions of options that expire in 4 days.
Well, what's funny is that when he came back, I think the shares of GameStop kind of plunged, and he lost something like $230 million in one day, which, God bless him. I wouldn't mind losing that much money.
Yeah,
If
he
I
was
had that
on
much
that
to
live
lose.
stream, and
Yeah.
while he was on the live stream, I think he
It just-
lost like $100 million. And
Yeah, it just really dropped. So, hey, Robinhood is trending. And listen, no news is bad news, I guess. Moving right along. Hey, Moish,
Hey,
do,
Kyle.
do you remember a couple months ago on Block and Order, we covered this really fascinating story about a little company called Debtbox. And Debtbox found itself with Sauron's eye staring upon it They were based in in Salt Lake City or somewhere in Utah, and the SEC had just come after them, throwing the gauntlet at them. And a federal judge there, Judge Shelby, I believe, had accused them of completely mishandling the case, acting in bad faith, and deliberately perpetuating falsehoods in its efforts to obtain an asset freeze and a temporary restraining order. They had accused Deadbox of $50 million illegal crypto scheme, which were rebuked by this judge. Following the dismissal of the lawsuit, the SEC was ordered to pay approximately $1.8 million in legal fees, including $1 million in attorney's fees and $750,000 in receivership. And now, lo and behold, following a bunch of personnel leaving the office, the SEC has closed the Salt Lake City office following this judgment. Apparently, one of 11 total offices in the United States that the SEC has. And yeah, I'm beaming about this because SEC just, we've talked about their enforcement actions that are just, come flying out of the wind all the time at these companies. And if they're, I mean, some, not all, what do you think? Do you think that this is directly correlated to that? Do you think that it's just sort of an office that doesn't get a lot of action? What do you think here?
It does seem a little bit on the nose that mere weeks after, basically their SEC attorneys are sanctioned and forced to resign in disgrace, that the SEC just axes the whole office and makes everyone move out of Utah. Which, I can't imagine how much fun it is to be like an SEC like staffer in Utah, but good for them. Yeah, I mean, how could it not be linked? I don't know. Like,
right.
I guess they're not going to say that. They're not going to say it's linked. They're like, oh, we just happened for personnel decisions to be closing this office.
Yeah.
But yeah, how big of a mess up do you have to do that imagine I'm an attorney.
Shutter the entire
I go
right.
and I win or lose my case, but I have to now resign and my entire office gets axed. Kind of messed up.
So if that's a good point. I didn't think of it that way. If we lost the litigation, if the firm lost the litigation and just Falcon Rapport just shutters its doors and everybody gets fired, we should joke about that. I'm sure that happens, right?
Cut it off at the limb.
Oh my God. Well, this has got a harrowing segment on Block and Order. I don't know if I want to think about that. What I think
it's all fun and games until it's happening to you, I guess.
It's all fun and games until someone loses an eye and then it's just fun. Is that the saying?
I haven't heard that one.
Oh, well, I guess we can trademark it now.
Well, look, I mean, I think this does raise larger legitimacy issues about the way the SEC is litigating these cases. And I think this is an example that now, every defense attorney is going to point to when you have an over aggressive SEC office. So I hope that cuts both ways. I mean, there's more ammunition on the defense bar. But I do hope that other SEC attorneys that are more rational and reasonable and good spirits, that are just trying to uphold the law,
right,
are taking note of this and saying, look, seriously, I'm an attorney. I have ethical responsibilities. I have responsibilities to the public, to the investors, and also to the companies that we're trying to enforce, to treat them fairly and reasonably.
Yeah, well said, Moish, as always. Well, moving right along, our old friend Elon Musk is back in the news. If you remember back in February, Musk quite publicly and famously sued OpenAI and its founder Sam Altman, and as well as Greg Brockman, alleging that OpenAI had strayed from the company's foundational mission of developing AI for the betterment of humanity. Musk criticized OpenAI's shift towards a for-profit model after partnering with Microsoft and engaging in some other investments that promised some substantial returns, claiming it contradicted the organization's original altruistic objectives. And then magically, the other day, Musk just withdrew the lawsuit. And I'm looking at a quote here from an attorney, Kyle Lawrence of Falcon Rapport and Berkman, in a publication called Business Insider. And Lawrence says, and I quote, Musk will probably get bored and withdraw this lawsuit, before long. So salient points there.
Who's this prescient Kyle guy?
I don't know. You had a crystal ball or something. Moish, what do you think about this? To the point that, did the case even hold water to begin with? Why is he withdrawing it now when it was up to, there was a motion to dismiss on the table? What's going on here behind the scenes?
Well, I guess we're never going to find out. I mean, it's quite a prescient quote. Look, there's a lot that happened. Elon, in fact, since then has publicized the raise that
Yeah.
XAI did. It was like hundreds of millions of dollars. It was like a huge fundraise for his own AI company. And yeah, like I don't think since that time he filed the lawsuit that OpenAI has at least in the public eye strayed like less from this foundational mission. If
Right.
anything, the only I've just heard in the news more and more criticism and more former and current employees criticizing their own employer, OpenAI's practices towards AI safety. So, if anything, I think the issue is probably even more acute now.
Right.
So, it is a little surprising that if Elon had this kind of standing up on a soapbox, doing this for the betterment of humanity type lawsuit, to just say, whoops, I got bored and now I'm running my own company and
Right.
I'll focus. It doesn't seem very Elon Musk to me to do that.
No, I agree with you. I think it's the sort of a combo of two things. One, Musk, for all the things that I know people like to criticize him for, and there's plenty of them out there, to his credit, he's done more for the electric vehicle industry than anybody else on on this planet has done. So you have to give him some credit for that. That industry was DOA, and he really brought it to where it is today. Not perfect, but definitely an improvement from where it was. But he is a master, probably the second best person on the planet at getting his name out there and in front of everybody, touch points. Everybody knows who he is, for better or for worse. And I wonder if this is maybe part of that because, you didn't hear his name for a week. So he does this. But to your point, you said something very interesting. XAI, which is his platform that he's been trying to launch, and I suspected back in February that he was suing OpenAI to slow them down so he could get his platform up and running and up to a place where it can become commercially viable and whatever it may be. And I'm wondering, maybe, just maybe, some of his investors say, I'm going to cut you a check, I'll give you a blank check, you can have whatever you want, but you have to stop this public dancing around. It's possible. That's just I don't know. I was right once on this case. Maybe I'll be right twice, but
It's an interesting
who knows?
theory.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the public rationale, I don't think there is one. Just doesn't make
No.
sense. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess we'll see.
I guess we'll see. Moving on, Moish, to another topic. This is a bit of a sort of pet project of mine, the concept of private asset tokenization. There's nothing, necessarily legal that happened this week that's particularly noteworthy. However, you see a lot of these articles on all of the trade journals about private asset tokenization, and nobody, I think, really fully understands what it means or how does it work, especially here in the United States with a murky, at best, regulatory framework. So just for everybody watching, asset tokenization is at its core the process of converting rights to a particular asset into a digital token on a blockchain. Very simple and succinct, easy to understand. This transformation allows real assets, such as art, real estate, natural resources, stocks, bonds, treasuries, to be traded more efficiently and more transparency. And in an era of heightened interest rates that we're in and have been for a while, and we're unsure where we're going to go the rest of the year, this allows investors to capture yield in a stable asset environment, in a stable asset, without having to move their funds out of the crypto ecosystem. In 2021, Franklin Templeton, who everybody knows, issued the first ever U.S. Registered mutual fund invested in U.S. treasuries on the blockchain. Earlier this year, 2.5 months ago, BlackRock launched something similar. It's now the largest tokenized treasury-backed fund in the world already. It's because it's BlackRock; they shit gold. There's a lot of pros and cons in this. Before I prattle on about how it works, Moish, do you have thoughts about private asset tokenization? We get a lot of clients who ask about it. It's at the forefront of a lot of our clients' minds. How do we do it? How do we capitalize this? Do you have any thoughts before I just ramble on for hours?
No, I mean you're doing great. Keep rambling, but I just think we do get a lot of questions about it, and I think there's a lot of skepticism expressed of, well, we can't just take things and put it on the blockchain. What does that solve?
Yeah.
But I do think there's a lot of issues with the way private funds currently work, especially on the lack of liquidity.
Yeah.
And just kind of a really inefficient process in terms of, but both from an investor and a capital raising perspective, there's just so much inefficiency. So if there's a way to do that more efficiently, fantastic.
Right. Yeah. And the biggest hurdle from where I'm sitting is really comes from a securities regulatory angle, because the idea is that if we open up these assets and we fractionalize them and we make them cheaper, we make them easier to buy, it's better for retail investors. It's better for mom and pop on Main Street to get in there and share in the wealth of these assets. But unfortunately, because we have this crazy regulatory scheme, the only way to do it legally is to treat it like a Regulation D promulgated under the Securities Act filing and only sell it to accredited investors, purchasing under these offerings. And that just leaves out a massive swath of retail investors. So, the thinking is good. The thinking is there. The intentions are good. But the road to hell is paved with good intentions, unfortunately. So the idea of cost efficiency, improved transparency, seeing these things on the blockchain, seeing who owns what, all these things are going to fly out the window until the United States government just kind of gets its act together and passes it. Whether it's the Blockchain Integrity Act is a good stepping stone for that, who knows, remains to be seen. But I'm very interested in this topic. I could talk about it for days. I'm not going to bore everybody with that, but I'm very interested in it. And if anybody has any comments or anybody wants to discuss it, you know where to find me. I think you do anyway.
All right. Well, moving on to our next topic. Terraform has agreed to pay a $4.5 billion penalty to the SEC. There's a lot of SEC in this episode.
There is.
I think we gotta, and the Do Kwon, the former CEO of Terraform, agreed to pay $204 million personally. And also Terraform is now agreeing to wind down their operations. And this is one of the largest penalties to ever settle a civil securities fraud lawsuit. Now, if you remember, Terraform Labs and Do Kwon were found guilty of securities fraud back in, related to the 2022 collapse of Terra Luna, which destroyed like $40 billion of value at the time. But I mean, this is the interesting part here is, Kyle, I mean, my question for you is, like, these guys don't have $4.5 billion. Like, why? What's the value of a $4.5 billion settlement when you know that there's no money there to collect? And I don't think there is in this case.
When this news came out, all I could think about is all of the lawyers and staffers who sat in a windowless room drinking stale coffee and just hearing everybody drone on about why their side was right. At the end of the day, Terraform filed bankruptcy back in January, and the SEC, and this part I actually didn't know, SEC is not high up on the creditor list of who gets paid back first. So I don't understand why they would spend all this time and put forth all this effort reaching this settlement when at the end of the day, the SEC is really probably not going to collect anything from Terraform. Pennies on the dollar at best.
Well, you're seeing that in a lot of the crypto consumer bankruptcies, that the government agencies are actually, purposefully allowing primarily consumer creditors to jump in line and to get paid out and to be higher in priority than they otherwise would be, because the role of these agencies is to protect investors. And so if they're just collecting the check instead of the investors,
well, right,
then the investors aren't being protected.
Thank you. That's exactly correct. It makes no sense. I don't understand this.
So I don't know, like, why. So is it just to get the headline of we have a $4.5 billion settlement that we're never gonna see any dime from, or maybe they'll see 3 cents in 5 years? Like, what's the point?
Right. And look, I'm not crying for Do Kwon or playing the world's smallest violin from him. I mean, he had heavily hyped Terra USD and Luna before the crash. He mocked critics on social media, called them idiots. And I think there was one quote he says, I don't debate the poor on Twitter, was one thing he said. So, here we are again with,
I mean, the YouTube videos were really good. And
it's pretty tough.
I'm sure we can link to some, because this will be on YouTube. But man, I mean, I guess I'm gonna go back a little bit. I'm talking myself into, well, if I'm the SEC, this guy is clearly the actor that we just described he is. Why not? That we know there's no money there, but let's get the judgment. If this guy ever, makes more money related to this, like Terraform, if he all of a sudden he finds a wallet 10 years from now, we'll just use the judgment deck to seize it. Like, I don't like, is that the thinking? I want to know, maybe there's an SEC person that secretly watches our show, because we talk about them all the time. Can come and like drop an anonymous comment about why they're doing this. But
we talk about them glowingly, by the way.
Yeah, we love them. Please come on Block and Order SEC.
I guess that's a good point, Moish. I guess that's possible that he has like a seed phrase written down somewhere in a basement that has access to a wallet that has 100 Bitcoin in it or something. It's possible.
I mean, I think that's possible in all these cases. I think it's possible with any of the CEOs of these large cryptocurrency companies that have collapsed is, whoops, there's $100 million in a private key, or he just
Yeah.
practiced for a year memorizing his 24 words, and like that's it. There's no other way to get it. Like, and he's going to get it and find a way to get $100 million in 10 years.
It's like
So,
Memento.
well, I
He
mean,
tattoos it on his arm so he doesn't forget.
no, that's Memento, right?
Yeah.
But that seems like if you're being interrogated by the SEC, probably a bad place to put your seed phrase.
Yeah, probably not ideal.
Although if you have no memory, if you have no long term memory,
I don't know what this is. It just happened to have 24 words. What? It's art. Don't criticize my art. We've already been through this in this episode. You can't criticize me for that. One interesting thing to note is that as part of the Terraform penalty, it consisted of a $420 million civil penalty. I wonder what intern came up with that number exactly.
Oh, did they really do that? Afford it?
That they did.
That's great.
Well, that wraps it up for this edition of Block and Order. Thank you for joining us on this episode. Don't forget to like and subscribe and follow us on all our socials. The links are down below in the show notes. If there's a particular topic you'd like covered, please also drop a comment below. We always read them, and we take suggestions very seriously. Please note this show is meant for informational and entertainment purposes only. Nothing contained herein is meant to be construed as legal and or financial advice. Please hire your own attorney and representatives if you're going to take the plunge. Also, just because we mention certain assets on the show does not represent an endorsement of said assets, and the makers of the show may hold probably an irresponsible amount of said assets, but again, that is not a disclaimer. So on behalf of Moish Peltz, I am Kyle Lawrence. Take care, everybody.
See you next time.